Before Donald Trump became president, we were not thinking about this, were we? And all of a sudden, the election changed. It is the issue that I have heard at the door most consistently. My party has said repeatedly, we will not give in to bullies, and we will defend Canada, and we will never put anything that we value on the negotiating table. Things that we value like healthcare, respect for all individuals, and taking care of the most vulnerable. My party has said that we will take any reciprocal tariffs and we will fund an enhanced EI program because we know it's coming. The reality is our riding is not going to get through this unscathed. We have to start planning, and the NDP commits to taking care of people and workers and our economy.
I think it bears really just touching on what exactly it is that's happening here with our American friends, with the American government, not with our American friends. They're still our American friends. It's the Trump administration that's the problem. So let's be sure that we make clear that this is the problem. What they are trying to do, very simply, is they are trying to collapse and destabilize our economy so they can devalue our currency. It's a very simple formula. In so doing, they not only create a percentage, the value of that tariff to funnel into their debt service, but it allows them, with a devalued Canadian dollar, to continue to buy the things that they buy from us for less than what they were, or at least as much as, or less than what they were paying before. This is war. This is most certainly a trade war, and its intent is to drive our currency down, create inflation here, and essentially sweep in and buy us out. This must be defended. The Liberal Party has a strong plan to deal with this.
So the third segment of tonight's event is questions we received from
Thanks. Look, I've been so proud to be Canadian. I've always been proud to be Canadian, but love of country and being willing to say out loud. I was the first federal party leader, by the way, to take on Donald Trump, although, albeit I was in the same room with him, but I didn't take him on there. I took him on in Parliament in our press conference room on January 3rd when I thought nobody was around. And I pointed out, we're never going to be the 51st state, but maybe California would like to be the 11th province. I had no idea that people in the US were going to put that online. 40 million Americans viewed this. And I like to think that we are now much more, as David and Colin said, when we sing O Canada, we sing it with new energy and passion. And I have a hard time not raising my fist on the we stand on guard, because I'm feeling kind of standing on guardish. The reality is we need to protect our economy. We need economic sovereignty. We need to have strategic reserves for natural resources, which we can do, so that we don't expose our forest sector and other resource sectors to the tariffs at all.
Okay, now our third segment is the questions that we received from our members. We'll be asking, I think, 9 tonight. We received over 30 submissions from our members by email, so we had to reduce it and select it based on the popular themes. I also wanted to let you know that those of us, those who are on the board of directors who are participating in any active campaign, excluded themselves from this process, so they were not involved in drafting the questions or selecting the questions, only those of us who were not actively involved. So we're going to start off with David and Colin and Elizabeth. The first question is on debt, on federal debt. All parties are attempting to woo voters with promises of new infrastructure, energy, defense, and social spending with no serious policies on how they would be funded at a time when the present government has been running deficits. How is your party planning to fund these programs without continuing to saddle the country with more deficits and debt? So that's David, Colin, and then Elizabeth.
Part of the issue of how to deal with this is through efficiency. This is something that federal government is an enormous machine with thousands and thousands of moving parts, people with competing interests, departments with budgets that they need to serve. First and foremost, above everything else, it's time to institute caps. We need to establish baselines that we will not go above, and then begin internally within those departments to look at efficiencies. How are we doing business? Where are our redundancies? This is something that politicians talk about, but very often get to the place where they can really make meaningful change. In this case, I have to say this is going to be driven by leadership. And in this regard, I strongly advocate for Mark Carney. Mark is a crisis manager. He is a PhD economist, a brilliant man with a clear vision for how to deal with these issues, first and foremost, by separating our operating and our capital budgets, and then looking at those operating budgets and finding dramatic ways to reduce them.
I don't think I heard an answer until the last 2 seconds, where it was reduced budgets. The reality is, the federal government is allowed to run a deficit, and that then adds to the debt. I come from the municipal government world. We don't have the ability to run a deficit. We must budget to balance our books. And so I know what it takes to balance books. But I'm going to answer the question that's on the screen there. And I'm going to apologize in advance. Is there anybody in the room who makes $5 to $10 million a year? We're coming to ask those people to pay their fair share. That's how we're going to fund these projects. If you look at the actual budget documents that have been released this week, as every platform other than the Greens who released theirs earlier, you're actually going to see that the NDP has a smaller deficit than the other parties. And that's because we are committed to making sure that the right people pay taxes. We need to ensure that society is fair. That's how we're going to balance the books.
I'm really proud of the work we've done within the Green Party of Canada. We've put forward a platform. By the way, the debt for Canada is a worry, but we still have the best debt to GDP ratio in the G7. But beyond that, we do need to spend money. We do need to prepare ourselves to be sure we're protected from whatever the Trump administration has coming at us. And at the same time, we need to address affordability. We need to address healthcare. The Greens have revenue in excess of what's needed to accomplish those goals by taxing places we haven't taxed before. The financial transaction tax, for example, will be 35 cents on every $100 worth of a transaction in bond trading and changing currency. It comes to enough money to completely end income taxes for anyone earning $40,000 a year or less. We get $121 billion over 5 years from wealth tax and more from corporate taxes. You can find these studies from the Parliamentary Budget Office that reviewed these revenue plans of the Green Party and approved that this is real money that we can get and avoid taxing, or rather avoid digging ourselves deeper into debt.
Question 2 is unemployment, and the order of responses will be Elizabeth, David, and then Colin. According to Stats Canada, federal government service employment has risen by more than 42% during the period from 2016 to 2024, whereas private sector employment has increased by only approximately 14% during the same period. Do you see this as a shift that needs right sizing? If not, why not? And if so, what adjustments would you recommend to your government? Elizabeth?
And how long will this answer?
1 minute, 30 seconds.
I'm confused by the instructions.
Okay,
Sorry.
it's 1 minute, I'm sorry, it's 1 minute, yeah.
Thanks, Susan. Well, Susan, the timekeeper has to know. Look, we're very fortunate in Saanich April to have a very low unemployment rate, but you're right, that whoever prepared that question, the public sector employment rates and the private sector employment rates have diverged. We need to make sure we have full employment, and for the best way to achieve that is what's called a circular economy, something Canada committed to in international meetings, but we're a long way from achieving. The number one thing we need to do is process our own resources in this country and not rip and ship resources to other countries where they process our raw logs, they process our raw bitumen. We need to hold our natural resources in strategic reserves and only release them for the benefit of our economy. By the way, did you know that Canada Pension Plan dollars are invested by the law of Canada only allowed based on return on investment, not benefit to the Canadian economy? We've got a lot of work to do, but we can employ a lot more people by processing our resources at home.
For the past 100 years, we have grown incredibly accustomed to shipping raw materials into the United States and then buying finished products from them. In fact, for the most part, most of the value add that is on American products, or most of the value on American products, starts at the beginning of, or at the end of our value chain. So the simple answer is to return this production home. And we're going to have to do that. And in order to do that, in order to have a homegrown economy, we're simply going to have to make this country more efficient in how it manages its own business. And to begin, we start by removing provincial barriers. This is one of the biggest problems that we've experienced in this country with cross-country trade, barriers between provinces in doing trade, which by removing could result in as much as $200 billion a year and a massive increase in employment for Canadians.
I didn't know the 42% number before the question was asked, and I didn't know that, and I'll own that. I'm not surprised that it's about 14% for the public or private sector. It's not sustainable, but let's not kid ourselves. That growth has been to provide services that you and I have come to value. Things like additional healthcare professionals, people who took care of us during COVID. The reality is, however, that we have to work within a reasonable budgetary framework. The scarcity model that we currently see constantly between the way that we govern, between the Conservatives and the Liberals, is not going to take us where we need to go as a society. The NDP believes in fair taxation so that we can actually provide the services in a sustainable fashion. But the 42%, that's probably too fast.
Thank you. The third question from submitted by our association members is on the carbon tax. And this will be answered first by Colin, and then Elizabeth, and then David. As a prelude to the election, all the major parties abandoned the consumer carbon tax. If you are elected and your party forms the next government, would you make a special effort to restore Canada's focus on climate change? What concrete measures would you propose, and how would you advance them?
I have to give the Conservatives credit. They took a program that was helping people, and it was encouraging us to not drive as much, and they demonized it. Very well. The truth is, the carbon tax is no different than a liquor tax, a cigarette tax. But people became so opposed to it that of course it became the political bad thing to have, and people decided to all unanimously say they'd get rid of it. Our party came out to Victoria and actually announced the following. We would end subsidies to oil companies that don't need them. And isn't it funny that that's something we have to announce? I live in the municipal world. Subsidies are for people who need help. So our party would take those subsidy dollars and give them to you so you could do energy retrofits.
Well, of course we need climate action, and we need it yesterday. I've been working on the climate crisis as an issue before it was a crisis. When I worked in government as a policy advisor to the government, believe it or not, I wasn't a member of the party, but I worked for the government of Brian Mulroney, working on climate change, and I learned all my climate science in those days from Environment Canada, top-notch scientists, where there was no debate about the science. There's no debate about the science today, except we know we're running out of time. I'm horrified by how many parties have run away from a very modest, insufficient program to provide some incentive for people to burn fewer fossil fuels. Let's be clear, when Gordon Campbell created the BC carbon tax, it was the gold standard, it was the first globally, and it was designed to be revenue neutral. All the money from the carbon tax went into the government of BC and reduced our provincial income taxes as a result. So, Colin, it's not like cigarettes or liquor. You don't get your money back from cigarettes or liquor. The way the carbon price was designed in this country, but particularly in BC, was revenue neutral.
I liked the carbon tax. I thought it was thoughtful. I thought it was well crafted. I thought it was very reasonable. The challenge, unfortunately, because of a very successful campaign by the Conservative Party, they essentially turned it into a debate that potentially could have torn this country apart. And it could have resulted in the time that it was raging, it could easily have resulted in a Conservative win, electoral win that could have put us into a far worse position than where we are today, thank goodness. So I sympathize with Mark Carney's decision to get rid of it, and I know, understanding the Liberal platform, I know that there is an entire new slate of measures coming in emissions caps and carbon trading that will replace it. But at the end of the day, I didn't have a problem with it, and I was disappointed to see it go.
Question 4 is on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, known as UNDRIP. And this will be responded first by David, and then Elizabeth, and then Colin. Political parties have spoken about increasing the rate of natural resource projects into production. How would you approach natural resource development and Indigenous community interest in the context of Canada's aspirations to implement UNDRIP?
Well, I think if there is resource development on nations' land, on First Nations land, I think they first and foremost have the right to embrace that development and to pursue it for their own communities. At the end of the day, I believe that it should still be within resource development and planning rules for the federal government, and I think that it should also fall into environmental assessment rules by the federal government, and I think that it should be harmonized in a way that doesn't allow projects like the Bannerton Quarry to escape the proper environmental assessments because of the fact that it happens to sit on First Nations land. That being said, I am certainly not opposed and would support the development of resources in First Nations communities that would benefit those communities.
Let's be clear as Canadians, it's not just the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which our government has said we are committed to respecting. It's Section 35 of the Constitution, and it's numerous other treaties where the honor of the Crown is at stake. And here in the Saanich territory, they're the Douglas trees, which are disrespected and ignored constantly, daily. So let's look in terms of natural resources and economic sovereignty and recognizing a nation-to-nation relationship. It is profoundly disrespectful and shameful that the government of Canada under Justin Trudeau bought the Kinder Morgan pipeline, plowed it through indigenous lands where people were saying we don't want it here. And now every single day that those Aframax tankers loaded with dilbit are leaving the port of Vancouver, they're putting at risk the Salish Sea, our coastline, species, and there's no way to clean up a dilbit spill, but Trudeau didn't care. I'm sorry, I can never give up being angry about this, and I will fight it to make sure our coastlines are protected from a substance that simply can't be cleaned up. There is no science to justify what was done.
I'm just going to say something in advance of a question that may come up. No more pipelines. We need to work within the framework that British Columbia has shown leadership in by passing DRIPA, an actual act that implements UNDRIP. I had the good fortune today to meet with SAIL leadership and talk to them about their aspirations as a nation. It is a balancing act because Canada historically has been a nation of natural resource extraction and marketing. The truth is, we need to transition to sustainable projects, and we need to have sustainable energy. We have to walk hand in hand with First Nations because it is the only way that we will find that there is willingness to have projects proceed. I believe in treating First Nations with respect, and the NDP will work with First Nations on projects to determine where there is community and country benefit.
Question 5, and this is on the CBC and public media, and we responded first by Elizabeth, and then Colin, and then David. Public media plays an important role in our democracy, and right now is under threat. Already a U.S. hedge fund owns the biggest news outlet in Canada. Will you commit to protecting the CBC? Where do you stand on the issue of support for the CBC?
One of the biggest threats to our democracy is disinformation being spread on social media by multinational giants, pirates and bastards like, I'm sorry, that word slipped out, I meant to see. But Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, they've ripped off our private information for their own profit and their wealth. Social media, as Madam Justice Hogue reported when she released her report on threats to Canadian democracy recently, is the biggest threat. How do we protect our democracy if we lose quality journalism? We can't protect democracy without the CBC. We desperately need to not only protect the CBC from Pierre Poilievre's plans to shut it down, but we need to fund it far better at the same levels that the BBC is funded in the UK. We need commercial-free CBC journalism in en français and en anglais for all Canadians and more Indigenous language programming. It will mean a significant funding commitment. It's in our budget.
Yes.
I grew up in a small town called Sicamous, BC. Have you heard of it?
Oh yeah.
We didn't have cable. I grew up on the CBC, Hockey Night in Canada, Tommy Hunter, The National. These are the programs that help define who we are. Journalism? Absolutely, we need independent journalism. And we need critical thinking in our schools. Storytelling. We need to tell our Canadian stories more than ever. And that's another role the CBC plays, isn't it? There are shows that I think we all should watch that tell us about our stories. To answer the question though, of course we should fund the CBC. Of course we should even make sure that we have annual increases so that they're not scrambling. A country like ours, more than ever, needs to tell our stories in a way that we can understand them in English and French and other languages. Love watching Hockey Night in Canada in a third language. It's a real wonderful thing. Our country needs the CBC, and I'm going to sound like Uncle Sam, the CBC needs you. Tune in.
I'll start by saying the current government is absolutely committed to protecting and preserving the CBC and increasing its budget by $150 million a year. So we'll start with that. The other thing I want to say is that part of the reason why I got into this campaign in the first place was because of what I saw was a coarsening political dialogue happening in this country. And I want to say tonight, and this is so important to me, and it's exacerbated, or the conversation is exacerbated by the fact that there is a member missing tonight. There's somebody that should be here. But I want to give a special note of appreciation to my colleagues who have been debating me now, I think, for 5 times. This is civil discourse in Canada. What you're witnessing here is civil discourse in Canada. Talking about policy, talking about government, talking about how we manage and change the rules. This is not throwing bombs. This is not being divisive or explosive. This is not farming hate and rage. And all of that starts with the connective tissue of this country, which is the CBC.
Yes.
Question 6 is on pipelines, and will be responded first by Colin, and then David, and then Elizabeth. Municipal politicians across Canada have written to political parties saying new pipelines require massive public handouts, trample on Indigenous claims, and mean more climate disasters hitting our cities and towns in years to come. The letter also says the federal government needs greater vision rather than entertaining ideas for more pipelines. If asked to reply on behalf of your party, what would you say?
Well, I kind of warned you I was going to tell you my answer to this previously. I would say, non merci, no thank you. We know that our future is not more pipelines. There is one party who would say, yes, we should have more pipelines, but they're not here to defend that. And truthfully, if drill baby drill is your mantra, we're probably not going to have a good chat at BI or Nachos. We have to, though, understand that our fellow Canadians across this country, many of them have their jobs and their homes because of natural resource extraction like fossil fuels. And we have to have what's known as a just transition. We can't snap our fingers and get rid of gas today. It has to happen over years, and it has to have the will. I believe that we have to get off of fossil fuels, but recognize we need to change direction. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is where we must go.
I'm an environmentalist. I am deeply worried about the state of this planet. I'm going to speak primarily for myself in this moment, but I'm also going to speak for my party. We are at a hinge moment in history. We are at a point now where we are closing in on 425 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. We are closing in on a level now that will take us perhaps as high as 3 degrees or more warming of the planet. This is, I don't want to cast a pall, I don't want to cast a shadow, but this is an extinction level event. And if we don't stop it and bring it to heel, it's going to destroy the planet, and it's going to destroy all of us along with it. We need to stop smoking. We need to stop putting fossil fuels into the air. My goal is to make pipelines irrelevant and make renewable energy, make Canada a renewable energy superpower, which is part of the Carney Plan.
I've been disturbed to hear Mark Carney talk about wanting new pipelines. It shocked me. Pipelines are already irrelevant. The National Energy Board looked at whether we had a pipeline capacity issue years ago and said we don't, from the point of view of the fossil fuel industry, need any more pipelines. And then we got one built. Anyway, the International Energy Agency, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, these are not lefty organizations that they've been saying for years. The only way for us to avoid a climate crisis that does become the kind of extinction event David mentions is no new fossil fuel infrastructure. It's simple. And no one in the oil patch is going to lose a job because we stop building new fossil fuel infrastructure that isn't needed. We must invest